Hey, good evening. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Gadi Schwartz coming to you from Los Angeles. And here's some of the stories we're watching tonight, starting with a new sky-high defense for Ukraine.
Anyone who defends his native land from invaders, every such warrior is on the path of justice.
The United States and its allies are getting ready to start training Ukrainian fighter pilots on F-16s and paving the way to send the U.S.-made jets to the front lines. But the question of just how many and when is still up in the air. And the truth hurts. Why the car rental company is apologizing for refusing to rent to a U.S. citizen from Puerto Rico.
It is a valid ID.
I need you to go about your business.
It is a prepaid reservation. I already...
Would you like me to call the police?
Yes, please, call the police.
And grass-fed greatness, how California is using goats to take a bite out of wildfire season.
They'll go through and basically act as a mower, if you will. They'll chew it all the way down to the ground.
Tonight, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is making his way to Japan to attend the G7 meeting in person this weekend. And it looks like he might be getting one of the biggest weapons he's been asking for months, those F-16 fighter jets. Now, all of this is still developing, and it comes with a whole lot of caveats. But it looks like the first step is a year to an 18-month-long training program that'll have to happen to get Ukrainian fighter pilots up to speed to make the transition from the Soviet MiGs that they're flying to the F-16s built by the United States. And at this point, it is still very unclear exactly what countries would be giving Ukraine those fighter jets, but any handoff would have to be approved by the United States, and that seems to be in the works now. NBC News White House correspondent Mike Mimley joins us now from Hiroshima, Japan. Mike, this feels like a huge reversal from President Biden on the F-16s. What are the terms as we know them right now? I know the United States has stopped short of saying that they're going to be the ones that hand over these jets, but what could this look like?
Yeah, Gadi, it's a big deal, but a big deal with an asterisk, let's put it that way, because as we saw on Friday, President Biden telling the other G7 leaders after some hesitation that he's now on board with this idea of training Ukrainian pilots to use the F-16s. That's a long way from saying we're sending them over so that they can use them tomorrow. So what a White House official is telling us is that while this training process is underway, the coalition of allies that's on board with this will begin discussing those fine details. Who is actually going to provide the F-16s? How many are they actually going to provide, and when will they actually show up? A top Pentagon official recently told Congress that it does take as long as 18 months to train those Ukrainian pilots to use this. So let's say you even cut that time in half, 9 months. Well, we're talking about them being able to be used next February. That's the 2-year anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So a long way to go, but it is a significant step, and it's not the first time we've seen the White House resistant to do something and ultimately get there. One of the reasons we've heard in the past for why that's the case is because they're always very careful about further provoking Russia to take its battle beyond Ukraine. That's been a top concern. Another thing is that they always want to make sure our allies are acting in lockstep whenever possible. So by waiting, by making sure everybody's on board with the I's dotted, the T's crossed, you make a collective statement like the one President Biden makes today, and it has that much more force. At least that's one explanation, Gadi.
It looks like any way you cut this is going to be seen as it could be seen as an escalation. How big of a deal is it that Zelensky is in person and he's making these visits to Hiroshima? I know yesterday you said the conflict in Ukraine is a huge part of the discussion there, and he's going to be arriving there to see these leaders face to face.
Yeah, well, Gadi, we've really seen throughout this entire conflict in Ukraine just how powerful that personal diplomacy from President Zelensky is. We remember what a big moment it was when he came to Washington last December speaking to Congress, how it really moved an audience in America that had maybe begun to fatigue over this war. And just over the past week, we've seen Zelensky traveling all over. He was in the United Kingdom, France, Germany. He met with the leaders of Italy's parliament president as well as the Pope during a trip to Rome. On Friday, he was in Saudi Arabia meeting with the Arab League. So he's been really on a mission to bring his case to these leaders directly wherever possible. And it's not just, it's important to note, the G7 leaders who are here in Hiroshima. There's been a group of leaders from other countries that have been invited to participate as well, including a country like India, which has actually continued to buy oil from Russia, for instance, and so has really been on the sidelines of this conflict. So this is a real opportunity for Zelensky to take his case to not just some allies who've been on board with him this entire time, but to some others who he wants to maybe bring into the fight as well.
Mike Mimley in Japan, thank you so much. And coming up a little bit later in the show, we're going to be talking to a military expert about what this could mean in Ukraine. Man accused of what's turning out to be one of the biggest classified document leaks in the century will stay in jail until his trial. That's what a federal judge ruled today in the hearing for Jack Teixeira, the Air National Guardsman who allegedly posted military secrets online. Now, here's how the judge put it. He asked, who did he put at risk? I mean, you could make a list as long as a phone book, including military personnel, medical workers overseas, and Ukrainian citizens. Teixeira's lawyers wanted him to be released to his father's care, but prosecutors pushed to keep him behind bars, saying he's a flight risk. Teixeira has not yet entered a plea in this case. NBC Pentagon correspondent Courtney Kuby has more on what happened in that courtroom.
Gadi, a judge today deciding that the Massachusetts Air National Guardsman accused of leaking a trove of classified Pentagon documents online will have to stay in custody in jail until his trial, rather than being released to his family as the defense requested. This is Jack Teixeira. He's accused of leaking these documents, and according to some information that came out from the government's lawyers, the prosecutors against him this week, the military knew he had a history of looking at classified information on their military computer systems and being reprimanded, being told not to do so. Now, the judge today referenced that information when he said he was concerned that Jack Teixeira simply did not have any concern about the fact that he was accessing this classified information and could have put it out into the public. In fact, the judge today using a really strong, harsh language about Teixeira's alleged actions, saying that the information that he put out into the ether could have harmed people, a number of people that could fill a phone book. He specifically referenced people like the U.S. military, Ukrainian citizens, and even NGOs, non-governmental agencies like Doctors Without Borders. The judge also said he had a couple of very specific concerns about Teixeira, including the fact that he had a fascination with guns, but also his total lack of concern about the fact that he was putting out these classified documents knowing that it was illegal to do so, even after Teixeira had the military training about handling of classified information and had signed a non-disclosure. Again, the judge today saying that the information, the evidence against Teixeira seemed to be very, very strong. Now, that being said, Gadi, Teixeira still has the opportunity to appeal this decision, but the fact that the judge's comments were so strong about him today, it doesn't seem plausible that he would actually reverse this decision today and allow Teixeira to go free or into the custody of his family. Now, at this point, there's still no date set for his next hearing, and he has not entered a plea deal. But it's possible that we could hear more from the government attorneys, from the government's prosecution in the coming weeks. Gadi?
And in New York City, hundreds gathered today to remember the life and legacy of Jordan Neely, the 30-year-old street performer who was killed earlier this month after another man put him in a chokehold while on the subway. And today, his family gathered saying their goodbyes in an emotional ceremony that at times turned into a call to action. And the man accused of killing Neely, 24-year-old Daniel Penny, faces a second-degree manslaughter charge. Penny was caught on video putting Neely in that deadly chokehold, but still says he is innocent. NBC's Rahima Ellis is in Harlem outside that church where the ceremony took place. Rahima, what else did you hear from people who attended?
The
There's a lot of sadness here today, Gadi, and people remember Jordan Neely as somebody who had ideas and thoughts and had hopes for his future, but it ended so sadly on the floor of a New York City subway. They also talked about the tragic irony that in this church behind me, the Mount Mehibo Baptist Church, that this is the same church where Neely's mother was eulogized when Neely was just a teenager. In 2007, his mother was murdered, and she was eulogized there at this church. And they talked about the fact that after she died, his mental health just seemed to decline all the more. Reverend Sharpton, in giving the eulogy today, talked about the fact that there are many people in America who experience mental illness and many families who have someone in their family who is struggling with this. And with that, he wonders why there's not more compassion. Take a listen.
We can't live in a city where you can choke me to death with no provocation, no weapon, no threat, and you go home and sleep in your bed while my family got to put me in a cemetery. There must be equal justice under the law.
And part of the justice that they're hoping for is not just in the criminal justice system, but also in the system of mental health, that there might be more assistance coming to people who can support them and to make certain their lives are much more full and don't end in the tragic way that Jordan Neely's did. Gadi?
Rahima, meanwhile, a lot of this has taken on a political life of its own, and we're also seeing a lot of support growing for Daniel Pinney, right?
We are indeed. There's been a defense fund, a GoFundMe page set up for Daniel Neely, and many conservatives have been logging on to that and joining that, including Nikki Haley, who's announced her intentions to, she's running for president, the star Kid Rock, and even last Friday, Florida's Governor George DeSantis, he shared the link to the GoFundMe page, and he tweeted out, "We must defend the Soros fund, we must defeat the Soros-funded DA and stop pro-criminal agenda and take back the streets for law-abiding citizens." This is resonating among people because already this fund has generated $2.6 million and growing. And what we know now that is happening is that what's the next step in terms of defense? The district attorney says he's still investigating this case, and he could send it on to the grand jury if there's more evidence to do that. Gadi?
Rahima Ellis, thanks so much. And a new development in that Disney versus Florida saga today. The company has now scrapped plans to open up a $1 billion employee campus near Orlando, Florida. All this coming as tensions rise even higher between the entertainment giant and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, who, by the way, is setting the stage to announce a 2024 presidential run. NBC News correspondent Gabe Gutierrez has this story.
This morning, NBC News has learned Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is preparing to formally announce he's running for president next week. That's according to two sources close to his political operation. DeSantis, who's already been making trips to critical early voting states like Iowa and New Hampshire, is expected to quickly become a top challenger to the GOP frontrunner, former President Trump. And it all comes as DeSantis is facing new questions over his escalating feud with Disney.
We will fight the woke in the legislature. We will fight the woke in corporate America. We will never, ever surrender to the woke mob.
The entertainment giant now scrapping plans to build a $1 billion office complex in Florida and relocate 2,000 jobs from California. In a letter to employees, a Disney executive writing, "This was not an easy decision to make, but I believe it is the right one," citing changing business conditions. DeSantis' press secretary firing back. Given the company's financial straits, falling market cap, and declining stock price, it is unsurprising that they would restructure their business operations and cancel unsuccessful ventures. They are the latest grenades in the war of words between DeSantis and Disney, which is also suing Florida for stripping its special self-governing status after the company opposed the state's Parental Rights in Education Act that critics call the Don't Say Gay law. Disney CEO Bob Iger responding last week before the office complex decision was announced.
Does the state want us to invest more, employ more people, and pay more taxes, or not?
Not just because Disney is Florida's largest single-site employer, but also because DeSantis married his wife Casey at Walt Disney World in 2009.
Who would have thought that when we're leaving Disney World as newlyweds, that, a decade and a half later, we'd be staring them down over a fundamental fight about, what is appropriate for our kids.
Gabe Gutierrez, thank you. And we've got much more in store for you this hour, including Hertz is saying sorry for something they say should have never happened. That's coming up, so don't go anywhere. And rental car company Hertz is apologizing after a man was denied a rental after showing his Puerto Rican driver's license. An employee with the company seemed to suggest the American citizen was a foreigner and needed to show another form of ID. And NBC's Maya Eglin has more.
It is a valid ID.
I need you to go about your business.
It is a prepaid reservation. I already...
Would you like me to call the police?
Yes, please, call the police.
Humberto Marchan, a U.S. citizen who lives in Puerto Rico, arrived at Louis Armstrong New Orleans International Airport last week and attempted to rent a car from Hertz.
I gave him my credit card and my license, and that at some point they raised the issue of the license being from Puerto Rico. As an out-of-country license, out-of-state, out-of-country license, they refer to it, and requiring a physical passport to go ahead with the check-in process.
He says he offered to show employees a photo of his passport instead, but they wouldn't accept it. Eventually, the Hertz employee called the police.
How did you feel when they denied your Puerto Rican license?
This is another example of second-class citizenship limbo that we Puerto Ricans live in. All of a sudden, you're being treated as someone who has never rented a car or something like that. But beyond that, falling a victim of ignorance.
But he was wrong. Marchand says he was told to leave the premises by police. NBC News reached out to the Kenner Police Department for comment, but they didn't respond. Marchand says he also had a real ID, which should be federally recognized in all 50 states and U.S. territories. Puerto Rico has been a territory of the United States since 1898, and Puerto Ricans have had American citizenship since 1917. In a statement to NBC News, the rental company said in part, Hertz accepts Puerto Rican driver's license from our customers renting in the U.S. without requiring a valid passport. The statement later goes on to apologize. Hertz also refunded Marchand the money he spent on his reservation. Cases like Marchand's are not unique. In a 2017 national poll, nearly half of Americans did not know Puerto Ricans were U.S. citizens.
Puerto Ricans may have restrictions on, say, the right to vote, but when it comes to interstate travel, Puerto Ricans carry the exact same passport as United States citizens.
Travel experts recommended checking what type of car insurance is needed, reading the fine print of the company's policy, and carrying multiple forms of ID to be extra safe.
Some do require another form of ID, like a passport, just to, again, supplement that identification process.
But Humberto says these issues go much deeper than that.
I think it's lack of education, lack of awareness, and a culture of ethnocentrism.
Maya Eglin, thanks so much. And coming up, the U.S. says they are now on board with giving Ukraine those F-16 fighter jets the country has been asking for. So why the change of heart? But first, gotta see this. Newly released body cam footage shows how a 2021 traffic stop turned into a wild ride. Right off the top, you should know the officer you're about to see is okay. But watch what happens. After being told he has an arrest warrant in another state, the suspect tries to take off. Trying to stop him, the officer climbs on the hood, but the suspect just keeps on driving. Then he floors it. The officer clung onto the car as it reached over 50 miles an hour. He was eventually thrown off into a ditch, but survived. All of it ended in a 5-year prison sentence for that driver. Right back. Hey, welcome back. Let's get you caught up in 30 seconds. The Air National Guardsman accused of leaking classified secrets appeared in court. The judge said Jack Teixeira must remain in jail until his trial, saying he poses a security risk. A viral video of a U.S. citizen in Puerto Rico who was denied his rental car at the airport leads to an apology from Hertz. And the U.S. and its allies plan to provide Ukraine with F-16 fighter jets. This as Russia is hit with new sanctions by leaders at the G7 summit in Japan. And let's dive a little bit deeper into what it means to have F-16 fighter jets in Ukraine. President Volodymyr Zelensky calls the move, quote, historic and a decision by the United States, which comes from the fact that this would be a major boost to Ukraine's military. But this wasn't always something that was guaranteed. In fact, back in February, President Biden was pretty much against it. Take a listen.
President Zelensky continues to say what he really needs are F-16s. Will you send F-16s?
Look, we're sending him what our seasoned military thinks he needs now. He needs tanks, he needs artillery, he needs air defense, including another HIMARS. There's things he needs now. There is no basis upon which there is a rationale, according to our military now, to provide F-16s.
But you're not ruling it out.
I am ruling it out for now.
But today, the president seems open to it, but a couple of questions come to mind. One, where will the jets come from? And two, what's led to this about-face from the administration? And to help us answer some of these questions, we're joined by military expert and senior fellow at Defense Priorities, retired Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis. Lieutenant Colonel, so we just heard President Biden there. He said he ruled out fighter jets for now back in February. Are you surprised by today's headlines?
Unfortunately, I'm not, because that's the pattern that we've been on really since this war began. And I kind of talked about it at the time that, yes, that was the position then, but that was also our position on nearly every kind of weapon system initially. And then later on that they did a about face and decided to go ahead and support it. So I'm not surprised at all at this. But look, what he said in February is really going to still be accurate because it's going to take quite a while before any of these aircraft get into the air. In the best case scenario, and there are lots of hurdles that are going to be limiting just how effective these can be. These are not game changers, no matter what anyone may think.
Is this going to be a line in the sand for Russia, do you think?
I don't, because there's so many other lines that we thought might be a problem before it, and they weren't. And look, one of the other reasons is that Russia's aware that F-16s, like any other jet that flies, is vulnerable to their air defense systems, their S-400s, their S-300s, and several other kinds of 2 S-6s and some other kinds of things that they have. And they're going to be vulnerable. They're not, a super weapon that can't be knocked down. They are very good aircraft. Let me not undersell them. They can certainly do a lot of positive things, but they're not invulnerable, and they're going to be subjected to the same kind of withering attacks that the Ukrainian MiG-29s have been.
One thing that's really interesting is that there's no hard timeline to this right now. It's going to take months, possibly over a year, before jets get to Ukraine. The training's complete. What does that tell you about how the allies are approaching the timeline to this war?
Yeah, you had I believe it was the Undersecretary of Defense in congressional testimony just a few months back say he thought it would be about 18-month timeline from the time a decision was made before they could be in the air. But then subsequent to that, the Pentagon apparently trained 2 Ukrainian fighter pilots and said, well, we actually think that it could be done in 4 months to bring them up to snuff on to being able to fly. But look, that's the absolute minimum level. And the shorter you have a training time, the less capable they're going to be in combat. So if you rush too fast, you could literally be rushing to failure, as I say. I don't think that they're going to have a chance to anything closer than 6 to 9 months, and even that's pushing it.
Yeah, 4 months to 18 months, 6 to 9 months is a pretty big window there. Retired Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Now, when you hear about athletes going on the injured list, you're probably thinking about a pulled hamstring or a torn ACL, but nearly a third into the way into the MLB season, several players have spent time on the injured list to treat their mental health. And one of them is Colorado Rockies pitcher Daniel Bard, who opened up to our Jesse Kirsch.
When you can throw a baseball close to 100 miles per hour, there's no question you're already a game changer. But this spring, Colorado Rockies star pitcher Daniel Bard changed the game in another way without throwing a single pitch.
Normally, I thrive under that pressure. When I started to feel like I was getting those same emotions, but they were becoming negative. They weren't helping me. They were hurting me. I knew something wasn't right.
Bard was battling anxiety ahead of opening day. He could have tried pushing through it, but instead, the 37-year-old reliever did something rarely seen in professional sports. He shared his struggle publicly, starting the season on the injured list to focus on his mental health. The Rockies say he missed 18 games before returning last month.
It was just the anticipation of having to perform every day and not feeling confident in my ability to do that thing.
Bard's one of 3 MLB players to openly take time off for their mental health this season. But that may be a serious undercount.
Teams will never admit it, but they come up with fake injuries all the time for players when they need a break.
Sports writer Danielle Allentuck says that can be for multiple issues, including mental health.
There are probably a lot more of them out there.
I think there's probably, dozens, 3 to 4 on every team every season.
So why did Bard speak up? He says it took some pressure off, looped in his teammates and fans, and helped him set an example for his kids.
Whether it's mental health or otherwise, just letting them know that you can face hard things, whatever that is.
So hopefully they'll speak up.
Hope so, or just, use it in their life to get through something.
After life's latest curveball, Bard's now back on the mound for the Rockies, an organization he says has been supportive.
Clubs are hearing and listening to what's happening with their players. No doubt about that. And they're hiring psychologists, mental skill coaches, people who are trained to help players in this regard.
The stigma has dropped. And so we are seeing more and more people saying, you know what, why wouldn't I work on this?
In a statement, Major League Baseball telling NBC, we've been proud of our longstanding work in this space to provide players with support. MLB says it also just launched a new youth-focused mental health and wellness program.
When things are good, you kind of walk out and you have this thought of, this is what I was born to do. I'm one of the best in the world. Let's go do this.
Bard's journey resonating with some fans.
I think it sends an incredible message for those that also need help. And so it's like, well, if he can do it, I can do it.
If somebody has a tweaked hamstring, you're not going to ask them to go sprint on it every day to see if it gets better. If you view mental health kind of the same way, especially in sports, but really in any area, I think you'll see a lot of these issues that deal with it and get back to being yourself.
And Jesse Kirsch joins us now. And Jesse, one of the best things about talking about something like this is that those who step forward realize that they're not the only ones, especially in this season, right?
Yeah, that's right, Gadi. We know of at least 2 other MLB players who have openly shared that they have been struggling with mental health issues and have spent time on the injured list for that. They are the Oakland A's pitcher Trevor May and then Austin Meadows, an outfielder for the Detroit Tigers. But again, as that sports writer shared with us, and I think just was something that caught me a little bit off guard when she shared it with me, it's this idea that there may be many more players out there who are not being open with that for any number of reasons. Obviously, there's no expectation they should have to be sharing that, but it just speaks to that this is something that Daniel Bard is hoping that he can help destigmatize, and obviously it's resonating with people both in the sport and beyond, Gadi.
Such an important story. Jesse Kirsch, thanks so much. And now to our newest series, Food Truck Fridays. Los Angeles, we've got a rep for being one of the best food truck hubs in the United States. And to celebrate AAPI month, this week we are trying Korean food. And guys, you know how I love puns. This place was called Soulmates. Get it? Seoul, South Korea. Anyway, we sat down with the owner, Christina, and chatted about her food and how it has changed her life. Check it out. Hi, how's it going?
Good, how are you?
Good, are you Christina?
Yes.
Gadi, great to meet you.
Great to meet you. Welcome to Soulmates.
Yeah, what's on the menu today?
Yeah, we got a lot of good stuff. Are you ready to eat?
I am ready to eat.
Korean food is big in Los Angeles, not only because it's delicious, but because SoCal actually has one of the largest populations of Koreans outside South Korea. Christina opened Soulmates right here in LA just last year, then came her food truck.
The beautiful idea of a bulgogi and the hoagie.
Exactly.
Right here.
Exactly. So it's a bulgogi.
There's nothing like Korean barbecue. And the smell is just... When you smell this, what do you think of?
It brings me back to home. When I went to college, I realized how much I missed my mom's food. And I wasn't grateful for it then, but then every time now I smell Korean barbecue or I eat Korean food, it brings me back to my mom's cooking, like my mom's form of love. And so that's essentially like how the restaurant came to be. Yeah. So what you're eating is pretty much, so bulgogi, it's a Korean staple in barbecue. So that one is a Korean fried chicken taco.
Nice, okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So chimek, it means like Korean chicken with beer. It's a huge culture in Korea.
Now, kimchi. Did you love it growing up?
Kimchi is a staple. I love it. It is something that it's in every Korean's home.
Your mom would make it?
Yeah, and you know, that's a tradition passed down from my grandmother.
So would you make the chili paste with her and all that?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, we fermented it in the fridge, but my mom's mom, when we would go to Korea, she lived on the mountainside, so she would do it the traditional way where put it in the jars and over winter time put it under the soil.
Right.
Yeah, so that's why a lot of Korean dishes have a lot of pickled food. So what we have here is the bibimbap. Bibim means mixed in Korean and bap means rice. So yeah, you pour that spicy sauce on there and then you mix everything together.
Yeah, all right. I'm glad we put the seaweed first. That's delicious.
This is mom's cooking right here.
This is no fusion. No, this is just mom's love right here.
Exactly. That is the traditional Korean mother's cooking right there.
She's got to be stoked when she sees this being sold here.
Well, yes, that, and my mom actually helped me like finalize a lot of the recipes here. I had to get the okay from my Korean oma, okay?
When she cooked for you, what did it feel like growing up?
It might sound so silly, but like it's love. Like it is my mom's form of showing her family like you guys are everything.
So this says what words can't even describe.
Exactly. It's more of it's a feeling. It's an emotion that you're eating.
So when you were growing up, you were embarrassed by this?
I was actually really bullied in elementary school for being Asian because I grew up in a predominantly, white neighborhood. And so I struggled with my identity a lot. It took growing up with my mom's food and moving away to fully appreciate it all. And now I'm in beautiful, sunny California and living the dream.
Doesn't get better than this.
No.
Oh my gosh. Thank you, Christina. Now I'm so hungry once again. Coming up, is tennis star Rafael Nadal about to call it quits for goods? And 2 words, fire goats. That's it. That's the tease. And that's coming up right after this. Hey, welcome back for a quick check of the headlines around the world in 80 seconds. At least 14 people in Italy are dead and thousands have been left homeless after the northern part of the country got nearly 6 months of rain in just 3 days. Roads have been blocked by mudslide and power is still out in some places. A local official says they are already looking at billions of dollars worth of damage. And tennis champion Rafael Nadal says he is pulling out of the French Open because of a hip injury. Nadal is 36 years old and says he isn't sure when he's going to compete again because, in his words, there comes a time when your body raises a white flag. Nadal has won a record 14 French Open titles and 22 Grand Slams. And a car drove through a gate in Vatican City last night, getting past guards and into a palace courtyard. The Vatican press office says guards shot at the car's front tires, but it kept moving. The driver was eventually arrested. And a 7.7 magnitude earthquake caused a small tsunami in the South Pacific today. The quake was measured about 20 miles deep southwest of Fiji. There were evacuations in some coastal areas near the island of Vanuatu, where a 2-foot tsunami came ashore, but no one was hurt. Now, it's not a new thing for adult children to move in with their parents to save some money, and it can be a pretty sweet deal. Sometimes you don't have to pay for food, maybe you get your old room back, but for some, moving back home is coming with some strings attached, like paying rent, and that's getting a lot of people on social media fired up. Here's NBC's Kaylee Hartung.
Hey there. Yes, this is the reality for so many 20-somethings and their parents. Like Kylie Deason in Gatesville, Texas. Just days after her high school graduation, she wrote her parents her first rent check. It may sound like tough love, but Kylie says this arrangement was actually the best thing for her and gave her a launch pad for adulthood.
After high school graduation in 2022, Kylie Deason became one of millions of young adults still living with her parents. But on their ranch in Gatesville, Texas, Kylie became a tenant, writing her parents a monthly rent check.
We let her know that, hey, if you decide to stay home and go to work, you will be responsible for paying some rent here at the house just to prepare you for the future. And we agreed on
$200 a month. And that was really her first dose of paying a bill.
Kylie says the deal made sense to her.
Like, people think that's crazy, but I wasn't that mad about it. I would much rather have to pay my mom and dad $200 a month than have to go pay somebody else $800. Like, to me, it sounded like an amazing deal.
Her parents, Cody and Erica Archie, sparked a heated debate when they shared their story on TikTok.
Hey, June the 1st, your rent's due.
Now, the TikTok has reached over 180,000 views.
Who's next? Go,
go, go, go.
Some posting their own videos supporting the plan.
As a mother of two, I will be charging my children rent.
And others blasting it.
In my culture, multi-generational households are not an exception. It's the norm. At 35, I could move back into my mom's house, husband and all, and she would not charge us rent.
Kylie's choice to live at home is increasingly common, as rising housing costs and soaring student debt mean more young adults are living with parents, whether they'd like to or not. A 2020 Pew Research study found that more than half of U.S. adults ages 18 to 29 lived with a parent, up from 31% in the 1970s. That number grew when more young adults moved home during the pandemic. And one survey found that for many, it wasn't temporary, with 67% of pandemic boomerang kids still living with mom and dad.
I think there's often a step back in maturity and in development when they move back home, because we naturally slip back into the roles of parents for us and children for them.
Kylie's parents say they tried to encourage their daughter's independence while she was living under their roof.
In the beginning, she had a hard time transitioning from a teenager living in her parents' home and going to high school into you're now an adult and basically a tenant.
Some parents even saving their children's rent money to give back to them when they finally move out. One TikToker suggesting they can put the nest egg toward a down payment on their own home. Jeffrey Jensen Arnett studies the formative years of early adulthood and put his research into practice when his own college-age twins moved home during the pandemic. He and his wife found ways other than charging rent to send their kids a message. It's time to start carrying your own weight.
We said, okay, you're adults, you're home now. Well, you're perfectly capable of doing the grocery shopping, doing the laundry, helping make meals, all the things that adults have to do on a daily basis.
And Arnett urges parents to remember, it's only temporary.
And there's going to come a time when they move out and they don't come back. And believe it or not, you'll miss them.
Kylie says she had a monthly budget that helped her save even more money while she paid rent to her parents. Now she is temporarily living with an aunt and uncle where she's doing plenty of babysitting in lieu of rent, and she plans to move into her own place in the next couple of months. Back to you.
Never too late to teach your kids a lesson. Kaylee Hartung, thanks so much. Before we go, it is time for the future of everything. Virgin Galactic is getting ready for its commercial space flights. We're going to talk to two mission specialists who are headed to space to make sure all systems are go. So stick around.
Fire, fire.
To all you kids down there, I was once a child with a dream, looking up to the stars. Now I'm an adult in a spaceship.
That is a party. And that was Sir Richard Branson just about 2 years ago blasting off into space. And this was on Virgin Galactic's first fully crewed space flight. Now, fast forward to next month when the first paying customers are going to take this same trip just outside of the boundary of space. So the clock is ticking, and the next week is the week that we're going to see the final mission for Virgin Galactic to make sure everything is running smoothly. And joining us now are two crew members of that upcoming launch. Chris Huey is a mission specialist, and Jamila Gilbert, who is also a mission specialist. Now, neither one of you has slipped the surly bonds of Earth before, right? This is your first trip to space. How are you guys feeling?
It is definitely the first rodeo, but I'm feeling excited, ecstatic. It is a really electric feeling to be told that you're going to be going to space. So we are just fully embracing that and counting down the minutes.
Counting down the minutes. And Chris, what are you doing to prepare?
You know, this is definitely my first time to space, so no doubt about that. But, you know, we're about to go through our training next week, and we're really excited and looking forward to that. But for now, just really preparing my mental space and getting, you know, eating well, exercising, sleeping well, anything you do for a big moment.
So before all systems are go for paying customers, you two have to make sure that all systems are go for the actual spacecraft, right? So what does a checklist like that look like?
Interesting for what I'm getting to do, I get to do the end-to-end customer experience. So that's as if we have just purchased a ticket, to going through all of training, to going into space flight, seeing Earth, coming back, and then telling everybody about it. Anybody who will listen, for sure. Yeah, we're going to get into training early next week. As Chris mentioned, super excited for that. And we'll be getting to work with our astronaut training team, our medical team, our hospitality teams, just to make sure that all of those touch points are perfect.
The touch points are perfect and the seats recline there. Chris, how about you? What does your checklist look like?
Very similar to Jamila's. I mean, I'm not serving as an engineer on this flight. I'm serving as a mission specialist, again, just like Jamila, to evaluate the customer experience and to make sure that all of our I's are dotted and our T's are crossed. And so it's really just paying attention, looking at the entire experience and just making sure that it's optimized and just perfect and ready to go for our customers when we start launching them not too long from now.
And Jamila, I know you're in Las Cruces, just down the road from Spaceport America. I got to say, I graduated from NMSU way back in the day. And I remember when Spaceport America was just literally like a sign in the middle of absolute nowhere saying, future spaceport. How have things changed in southern New Mexico because of the spaceport?
Absolutely, and I love speaking to a fellow Aggie, so that's wonderful to hear. It has definitely been, we've been waiting eagerly as locals, have been so excited to see it all come together and see this, even when a few years back when we had the Southern Road and the road to Spaceport came together, and now here it is, this big, beautiful building just ready to take customers to space. So it is an exciting, exciting moment, and I think everyone is starting to feel that electricity and that energy as we're closer and closer and closer.
Chris, what do you think? Do you think this is going to become one of the premier spaceports on planet Earth? And where do you see commercial spaceflight going after this?
I think this is already the premier spaceport. It's a very exciting, very beautiful building. The whole thing just encompasses you, and it's purpose built for sending you to space, and you feel like that experience, like you're walking onto a spaceship. It's a really bizarre feeling to drive up to this building. It's an even more amazing experience just to like walk into it and be enveloped, and you feel like you're about to do something very, very exhilarating and just out of this world. So I think the future of commercial spaceflight, I think this is only the beginning, and it's only going to become more and more common as we go on and more flights go off and more people get to experience it. So I think this is really just the beginning.
And fingers crossed, New Mexicans can get a little bit of a locals discount going up to space. Chris and Jamila, thanks so much. And have you heard about the new workers protecting California during the fire season? The state is turning to goats. We are not kidding. They eat up grass and brush that could end up fueling wildfires. And NBC News correspondent Steve Patterson has that story.
After 3 years of punishing drought, Mother Nature drenched California this past winter, bringing to life landscapes that have been dry, cracked, and parched. But with all this beauty will eventually come a beast. Wildfire season is just around the corner and will be fueled with the rampant growth of grass, brush, and trees brought on by record atmospheric rivers. So officials are now leaning on unique solutions to fight fire with...
What are these goats doing?
These goats are doing fuels abatement.
Since 2013, Tim Aerosmith and his herd of 4,000 goats have been chewing up fire-prone areas like this one in West Sacramento, where Parks Operations Superintendent Jason Popolo puts them to good use.
So, why goats?
There's a lot of areas that are very hard to reach in terms of getting down into thick brush, deep hollows, riverbanks. That is difficult for my staff in terms of safety, equipment they can use. They'll go through and basically act as a mower, if you will. They'll chew it all the way down to the ground.
These goats, all females, will consume 3 acres in a day. And since they're not picky eaters, they'll mow down vegetation that other grazing animals can't reach.
If a city needs fire mitigation, they've done it for years using human hands, using machinery. Why should they contract you?
What I can accomplish with a set of goats in a given day puts to shame what a hand crew or a mow crew or a weed-eating crew can do. These goats work all the time. The only time they stop working is when the sun goes down and it's dark and they lay around and chew their cud.
The herds start grazing in March through October and then take a break in the winter to give birth to a whole new class of kids.
And how many areas do you do?
We will move about 150 times this summer. Probably about 6 different groups of goats, and they'll be doing fire mitigations for homeowners associations, forestry, cities, municipalities, utilities, private owners. They're like eating candy right now. Yeah. And they'll move to the next best thing, and finally they'll take down the less desirable grasses, shrubs.
How do you keep them on the job, focused and moving in the areas that you need to move?
They start paying attention to this herder right here, and when they finished it, they get real noisy. And they start telling him, we're done, we want to move. Okay. And he knows that, and he'll have his next paddock built, and he'll open it, and they just flood through.
The goats are now a destination for many.
That's the biggest success. Every year we have the public asking, when are the goats coming back? Because they're out there visiting them, watching them with their kids.
Tim says home is wherever his goats are. He grew up loving animals on a ranch in Northern California, but spent 15 years at a desk job in the mortgage business.
I was 50, and I went, what do I want to do different? And I thought, wow, if they're going to pay me to graze my goats, what a gig. And I went to Oregon and I picked up 10 goats and came home, and it's grown from there.
Is this sort of like this full circle moment?
It really is. You know, I started out farming and ranching. We worked hard. At the time, we didn't like it. You know, it was hot, it was work. It taught us a work ethic. It taught us business.
Will you have more work because of all the rain and there's more vegetation?
Some of the producers are saying we haven't seen fire fuels like this in 20 years. 3 and 4 feet of fuel down south. So, yeah, they're going to be busy.
Happy goats, though.
Happy goats!
Steve Patterson, NBC News.
Not bad, Steve. Not bad at all. And finally, here are your 60 seconds of joy to end the week. We want you to meet Khalil Watson. At 25, he just earned his associate's degree, something that seemed impossible a few years ago because in 2016, Khalil was shot and left paralyzed from the neck down. He had to relearn to talk, to eat, even to breathe, all while pushing himself to keep learning. But for the last 2 weeks, he's been practicing walking with the help of that exoskeleton, all looking forward to one special moment. And Khalil says walking to graduation meant so much to him, especially after not being able to walk during his high school graduation. He now plans to pursue a career in social work. And speaking of graduations, NBC's own Lester Holt was at Villanova University today, where he received an honorary doctorate. He also gave a pretty inspiring commencement speech.
Until we can acknowledge what we don't know, we can't possibly be asking the right questions. You don't have to be the smartest guy in the room. Your aim should be to be the one asking for more information, the one audacious enough to say, I don't know.
Dr. Holt right there, and that sums up exactly how we see things. The world is massive, it is complex, it is messy, it is beautiful, and so many times we just don't know everything that's happening, but you know what? We love asking questions and telling you what we're learning as best as we can. That does it for us this week. I'm Gadi Schwartz. We'll see you Monday, but until then, stay tuned.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.